welcome back. Last week we read through the Torah portion, Devarim. I hope you caught it, but if you didn't, I will link the playlist of Devarim at the end of this video. Just to recap, we saw an exasperated Moses who has become fed up with the actions of the tribes of Israel, and he appoints judges to alleviate some of the load off himself as God instructed him. Also, we see the spies go into the promised land and bring back a disheartening report that got the Jewish people into a lot of trouble. Nevertheless, God leads the people to defeat and conquer the land on the east side of Jordan River, controlled by King Sihon, the Amorite king of Heshbon, and the giant King Og of Bashan. After their defeat, the tribes of Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh settled the land east of the Jordan River. And it's here where we pick up with Va'etikon, where Moses pleads with God to allow him to enter the promised land. Now let's read the first reading, which begins in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 23, Va'etikon. Continuing his farewell address, Moses said, "Seeing that God had allowed me to assign the territory that we conquered on the eastern side of Jordan River to some of the tribes, I thought that he might now be reconsidering his decree not to let me enter the land, thus intending to let me finish dividing it among the tribes. I therefore thought it an opportune time to reiterate my profound desire to enter the land of Israel. I both prayed to God and entreated him at that time, saying, God, I know that you are merciful even when meting out justice. For when the people sinned by making a golden calf, you took the initiative to show me, your servant, your magnanimity and your right hand, which metes out loving kindness. It's stronger than your left hand, which metes out strict justice and can overcome it. And that is our prayers that make your mercy override your justice. That is why I am praying to you now and requesting mercy. For who is like you, God, in heaven or on earth? Who can match your deeds or your might? Mortal kings have advisors who convince them not to be lenient or merciful, but you can do whatever you please. And I see now that you have allowed me to begin conquering the land. My request, please let me cross the Jordan River, complete the conquest of the land, and see the good land that is on the other side of the Jordan River, including the good mountain, which you will choose as the location of the temple and the constructing and functioning temple itself, which is termed the Lebanon, because it whitens the sins of the people. And the word Levan, where Lebanon comes from, means white. But God became angry with me because of my improper response to you when you complained against him at Kadesh, and he therefore did not heed me. God said to me, your entreaty in this regard suffices for me to understand how important this matter is to you. Speak to me no longer regarding this matter, so that the people should not consider me harsh or you pestering. Furthermore, a reward for your merits much better than what you're requesting awaits you in the afterlife. However, I will allow you to see not only the good parts of the land, that is, the exceptional parts as you requested, but all of it. Ascend to the peak of Mount Nebo and lift up your eyes westward, northward, southward, and eastward and see it, but only from afar with your eyes, for you will not cross this Jordan River. Instead, prepare your successor to cross the river and lead the people into the land. Command Joshua not to be fazed by the people's troublesomeness, mistrust of their leaders, and general litigiousness. Strengthen him and encourage him, lest he fear that just as I am denying you entrance into the land because of your shortcomings, so will I eventually do the same to him. For despite any shortcomings he may have, he will nevertheless cross the Jordan River before this people. And he will apportion to them the land that you will merely see. His success. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. Where did we leave off here? Let's just start here. For despite any shortcomings he may have, he will nevertheless cross over the Jordan River before this people, and he will apportion to them the land that you will merely see. I am making his success dependent upon one condition, that he travel before this people, leading them into battle himself. Only then will he be able to conquer and apportion the land to them. They will lose any battle that he does not lead. After we conquered the territory of Sihon and Og, and I apportioned it to some of your tribes, we moved on the plains of Moab, where we are presently located. We abided in the valley opposite Shittim, also known as Beit Pe'or, which is the house of Peor, where some of you were lured into committing lechery and idolatry. Despite this, you have been forgiven for your sins and will soon cross over into the promised land, whereas I did not merit to be forgiven and will therefore not cross over into it. See then how gracious God has been to you. And you really need to understand that word lechery in this section. And lechery means excessive or unrestrained sexual desire, especially when offensive or immoral. That's an important point to remember as we go on here. You'll see that in just a moment. As we're continuing on in chapter 4 and verse 2, the commandments are perfect. You do not need to try to enhance them in any way. Do not add anything to what I command you, nor subtract from it, in order to observe the commandments of God, your God, that I am commanding you exactly as they should be observed. You have seen with your own eyes what God did in the incident involving Beit Pe'or, how God, your God, exterminated from your midst every individual who abandoned him and followed Beit Pe'or. I want to go back and look at that verse 29 that we just read and pay attention there to the house. I'm going to read 29 again. And I'm going somewhere with this, and it's very interesting. Verse 29 again, after we conquered the territory of Sihon and Og, and I apportioned it to some of your tribes, we moved on the plains of Moab, where we are presently located. We abided in the valley opposite Shittim, also known as Beit Pe'or, or the house of Peor, where some of you were lured into committing lechery and idolatry. Despite this, you have been forgiven for your sins and will soon cross over into the promised land, whereas I did not merit to be forgiven and will therefore not cross over into it. See then how gracious God has been to you. And we're going to expound upon this, and you're going to see just exactly how gracious God was, which is the point that Moshe is trying to get across here. I'm going to turn to Numbers 25 and verse 2. There's a whole section in here that is really good, but I want to pay attention to they were, again, in the plains of Moab. And in verse 2 it says, the Moabite girls invited the people to the feast offerings of their gods, and 157,200 of the people ate of the offerings and prostrated themselves to their gods on the urging of the Moabite girls. Whenever a Moabite girl would seduce an Israelite man, and they were on the verge of carnal relations, the girl would take an idol out of her garment and tell the man to worship it first. The Moabite idol was named Beit Pe'or, which means the master of bearing, for they worshipped it by bearing their fundament and defecating in front of the idol. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but use your imagination. They are bearing their fundament and defecating in front of the idol, which is where the bearing comes in, Peor. I just couldn't believe that. I never had heard that before, but that leads me back to Deutoronomy 3:29. We're going to read this again because this is the key verse to this whole Torah portion. I really feel, because it sums it all up as we look at this stuff. Again, in that Canaan, the first reading, Deuteronomy chapter 3 and verse 29. After we conquered the territory of Sihon and Og, and I appointed it to some of your tribes, specifically Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh, we moved on the plains of Moab, where we are presently located. We abided in the valley opposite Shittim, also known as Beit Pe'or, the house of Peor. Now, I have one question. It says they were lured into some lechery and idolatry, but if they knew what was going on there, and this is the house of Peor, and God talks about the sin with Baal Peor, what were they doing there? This was senseless. I don't know why they were there, and I can see how Moshe was getting upset with them, and they're between this and their constant bickering and their disobeying God, and God still forgave them. That was pure wickedness, and God still forgave them and gave them the land. Again, so now Israel, listen to the rules and the ordinances that I am teaching you to observe in order that you may live and enter and take possession of the land that God, your God of your fathers, is giving you. This was our kickoff here to Beit Canaan, and Moshe's not going. And I'm surprised if God didn't remember, this is the younger generation. God allowed the older generation to die off. And you can see how wicked this generation is. And he's still letting them have the land. He's fulfilling the promise. But I think they could have easily been cut off. Join us tomorrow as we get into the rest of the story here with Beit Canaan, and we'll see what happens. See what happens tomorrow. Most importantly, you know the thing. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you missed any of Devarim, I will link the playlist over here somewhere or over there, and the link to subscribe should pop up somewhere over here shortly. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time. I hope you got something out of it. Leave me a comment down in there. What do you think about Beit Pe'or? Thanks a lot. Have a good day. God bless.